we will study BRYONIA ALBA. We know that each and every medicine has its own sphere of action. Thereby, it differs from other remedies. As we see, there are some remedies where the symptoms come so suddenly and violently, like in aconite, and as we see in ignatia, how unexpected the symptoms are. And in belladonna, the symptoms come with so suddenness that one cannot even think of. Its complaints are continuous and remittent, very occasionally intermittent. They develop into violence, but its violence is not the first flash of aconite or belladonna. Hence, it conforms to the type of disease with continued fever, to rheumatism that grows slowly into severity, involving one joint after another, till the whole fibrous tissue are in state of inflammation, pain and distress. It has inflammatory conditions anywhere in the body, but particularly it affects fibrous tissue, ligaments, serous membranes and aponeurosis. It also affects the coatings of the nerves. From the beginning, there are present some characteristic features. The patient has several days of preparation. For days, he doesn't feel well, he feels tired, languid, weak, he doesn't want to move, he doesn't want to be spoken to, and this gradually increases. And finally, this settles into a continuous pain. The parts become hot and inflamed until he is down with rheumatism. There is pain which is aggravated on slightest movement. The complaints come on after exposure to cold, but not like aconite or belladonna. After exposure to cold, he begins to feel unwell. Nose discharges and there is sneezings and there is rawness in chest. In a day or 2 days, he has chill and then come down with some inflammatory trouble, pleurisy or pneumonia. Its inflammatory complaints include the inflammation of pleural membranes, coverings of brain, peritoneum and coverings of heart. It has inflammation of organs. In all the inflammatory conditions and pains, he doesn't want to speak to, he doesn't want to move. All the achings and pains are made worse by slightest movement. Thus, we have the well-known aggravation from motion. It may be gastroenteritis or peritonitis or inflammation of bowel or inflammation of joints, whether of rheumatic character or not. Even after exposure to cold or injury. In all these conditions, he has great sensitivity and he is averse to motion. Slightest movement aggravates, desire to keep perfectly still. BRYONIA is indicated in injuries of joints after arnica has failed. In damp climate, BRYONIA is often indicated. But in clear weathers, when the thermometer runs low, aconite is more frequently indicated. In inflammatory conditions, gelsemium is indicated. In talks on classical homeopathy, Dr. Vitholkas gives a beautiful picture of BRYONIA mind. He says that these people are very insecure inside. There is financial insecurity and these are earthy people. materialistic minded people. It is a man who is primarily alone because he has lot of irritability and anger inside, and they don't want to show it, and in the background there is deep insecurity regarding financial matters. They don't want interference. Their attitude is, let me go through by myself, and they will not seek help at emotional or mental level. They become so irresponsible that they want to deal with their problems by themselves. Usually, what you will get in BRYONIA patient is that the person attending him will tell you that he is very sick and he doesn't want interference. If you offer him a tea, he will drink it with great relish, and he is thirsty and warm drinks ameliorate him. But he is aggravated by the fact that he is disturbed by asking him if he wants tea. They are a stiff kind of people, emotionally very dry, and doesn't want any interference from anyone. They see life, what is right, what is wrong. They are not imaginative kind of people. They are not making jokes. They are a very serious people. They will not laugh. There is a great fear of poverty, as if they will be poor. They cannot see anything else but money, which gives them security. There is a deep sense of insecurity concerning financial matters. They are business-like people, and this is why we will usually find in their deliriums that they are talking about business, because thoughts of business occupying their mind subconsciously. He has acute complaints aggravated after anger, after controversy, or anything that arouses his emotions, or anything that compels him to think. In rheumatic complaints, typhoid and pneumonia, when he is aroused from stupefaction stage, he sees images, he is fearful, he thinks he is away from home and he wants to go home. He lies down but still he wants to go home. Delirium is of low type. It is not the flashing, wild excitement of belladonna or stimonium. It is very opposite. He talks if you disturb him. Otherwise, he will lie down in quietude. You disturb him and he will say, go away, let me go home. If you let him alone, he will relapse into perfectly quiet state. There are irrational talks of business that are aggravated after 3 p.m. Usually, you will find delirium commencing at 9 p.m. like fever and stay all night. The acute mental state commences in the morning after rising, but as the febrile state advances, then there is aggravation at 9 p.m. If chill comes, it is at 9 p.m. If fever comes, it is at 9 p.m. And if mental state is upmost, then it is aggravated at 9 p.m. Sometimes it is very difficult to distinguish between chamomilla child and BRYONIA child. Both are extremely irritable, but chamomilla child is aggravated at 9 a.m. whereas BRYONIA child is aggravated at 9 p.m. In BRYONIA there is a keynote that he wants something but doesn't know what it is. It is a symptom calling for BRYONIA if the rest of the symptoms agrees with. You go to a child who is being carried in the arms of nurse, wants this toy, that toy, one toy after another. And when you get him that toy, he rejects it and throws it at your face. When that case is thoroughly looked into, it may be covered by the symptoms of creosote. Another is never satisfied with anything and rejects everything when given to him he asks for. But if you look into such case, it may be covered by chamomilla. Desire for things that he cannot have, which are refused when offered to him. Bryonia patient is sad, full of fears, fear of death, despair of recovery, anxiety, confusion of mind. All these mental symptoms are ameliorated in open, cold air. He wants to keep still and prefers to lie down in dark room. They are always worse from the visitors. Violent congestive headaches that come few hours after controversy or some misunderstanding with someone, we know that staphylococcus is a remedy. But Bryonia also has it. If in a chronic state, a patient says that, doctor, if ever I have a dispute, I come down with nervousness, sleeplessness and headaches, then you do not need to work long upon that case. It is most likely staphylococcus. There is pain in head with almost all acute complaints. There is dullness, confusion of mind, as if skull would split up, throbbing, violent headache, and patient wants to press it with both hands. Pains are worse from motion, winking of eyes, wants to tie it up, and he prefers to lie down with closed eyes in dark room and in cold room. The headache of bryonia is commonly the forerunner of many complaints. In congestion of lungs, bronchitis, or in some other congestive diseases, he wakes up in the morning with congestive headache over the eyes and over the back of the head, which is ameliorated by hard pressure and aggravated in warm room and warm place. The motion of the arms and doing work with the arms is generally accompanied by the complaints of upper body and head. So that one of the old keynote in the times of herring was complaints from ironing. As you know that ironing needs a warm room and the motion of arms. Headaches after washing himself when he is perspiring, or headache after suppression of perspiration. Headache is so bad in pneumonias and in congestive conditions that he has to hold his head because it hurts from the action of coughing. In all the complaints, bryonia patient is aggravated after eating. Cough is worse after eating, gout is worse after eating, and the patient generally says that he is always worse after eating. Headache is always accompanied by nosebleed, and headache is associated with constipation. In bryonia headaches and rheumatic complaints, if the patient can perspire freely, he gets relief. It is a general symptom of bryonia that perspiration ameliorate all complaints. And in catarrhal condition of eyes, there will be redness, inflammation, smarting, burning, sore eyes on slight movement associated with headache or with coryza or with the troubles of air passages. Think of bryonia when gouty conditions has left certain part of the body and all at once eyes are affected. There is tumefaction of lids, conjunctiva is highly inflamed, and on movement the pain is very severe. Burning, soreness, smarting is there. You find out that in chronic gouty subjects, he was having acute arthritic inflammation of joints and now he had sore eyes. Rheumatic iritis caused by cold. That is rheumatic inflammation of eyes. In olden times, it was described as the arthritic sore eyes. That means sore eyes in gouty constitutions. Many of the complaints of bryonia commences in nose. There is sneezing, running nose, stuffiness and aching in eyes, nose, head along with it, and then the trouble travels down. Then there is sore throat with stitching pains, dryness of mucous membranes, and the patient desires large quantities of water, and there is purged appearance of mucous membranes in throat. And then the trouble affects the larynx with hoarseness, and then bronchitis comes in. If it is not checked, there is pneumonia and pleurisy. And all the conditions are aggravated by slightest motion. So the trouble has travelled from the beginning of respiratory tract, that is nose, to lung tissue. And all the complaints are aggravated from slightest motion. There is a great deal of congestion, burning and more or less fever. Sometimes the fever is very intense and the patient wants to keep still, because the slightest movement aggravate all conditions. There is violent coughing and the coughing shakes the whole body, and there is increase of headache while coughing. There is congestive headache, sore, bruised all over body. He is often worse at 9 p.m. in the evening. Dullness of mind aggravated at night and in the morning, waking on. And there is frequent sneezings and sneezing between two coughs, loss of smell, and there is bleeding from nose during coryza. In children as well as in adults, there is gradually increasing cerebral conditions with besotted continence and dilated pupil. And you will notice a chewing movement in the mouth. This is a very strong feature. This motion of the jaw in congestive attack is a strong feature of bryonia. This is not the grinding of teeth, but it is the chewing movement of the mouth. Constant motion of mouth as if the patient is chewing in brain affections. It occurs in the little ones even when there are no teeth. The movement as if they are chewing. Great dryness of lips. Children pick up the lips. Cracked, dry, bleeding tongue. The whole mouth is cracked, dry, brown and bleeding. There is crusty, thick coating on the tongue. In all the affections, in cerebral conditions, respiratory conditions and typhoid conditions. And when the patient has pneumonia, it prefers the right side. There is dry, hacking cough with much violence, and he holds the chest with both hands to avoid the least movement. And he prefers to lie on the right side or on back. Sometimes pleura is involved and we have sharp stitching pain with each breath. Whether it is pleuropneumonia or simple pneumonia, patient prefers to lie on affected side and he presses the side with both hands to avoid the least movement. And if you see the right side is affected and there is rusty expectoration or blood stained expectoration, then it is mostly the bryonia case. But if you see a case very high fever with bright red expectoration, left side is involved, and after a cold the case develops so rapidly to pneumonia, then the aconite is the remedy. Bryonia breathing is panting, little rapid short breaths to avoid the movement of the chest muscles, because deep breathing aggravates the complaints. Though he desires to have deep breaths, but to avoid the motion of the chest, he takes short rapid breaths. Asthmatic attacks from being overheated, worse in warm room, better in cold air, open air. Bryonia, toothache, sharp stitching pains in tooth while eating, worse in warm room, warm food, and warm drinks. And he feels better by holding cold water in mouth, but movement of the mouth aggravates. Then we come to desires and aversions. He has aversions to all foods, desires immediately something, and when offered, he refuses that thing, and he doesn't know what actually he wants. He craves acids, and there is great desire for cold water. But in stomach complaints, he feels better after warm drinks. In head complaints and in febrile states, he craves cold water. But cold water always aggravates his cough and other complaints. In stomach complaints, he feels better after warm drinks. In chills, BRYONIA patient craves the cold water, but it increases the chill dreadfully. He has aversion to all greasy foods, fat foods. BRYONIA patient is subject to hiccup, nausea, vomiting of bile, taste bitter. Even the sour food tastes bitter. The symptoms of stomach arising after disordered stomach, from taking cold or from being chilled when overheated. It can be diagnosed as gastroenteritis. It is all associated with soreness, tenderness, burning and stitching pains, aggravation on slightest movement. In inflammatory conditions of stomach, abdomen, nausea, vomiting, tympanic, abdomen, all is aggravated by slightest movement. So in inflammatory conditions of BRYONIA, you will always find the patient lying with flexed limbs to reduce the movement of abdominal muscles. He doesn't want to be talked to and he doesn't want to think, as each movement aggravate the complaints. There is alternation of chilliness with fever. BRYONIA patient, when lies perfectly quiet, is free from nausea. As soon as he raises his head from the pillow, there is dreadful sickness, nausea returns, and he cannot sit up in the bed. Disordered stomach, sore, tenderness, pain, burning pains are all ameliorated by applying warmth on the abdomen. Although a patient wants to lie in cool room, the heat of the room is oppressive, but the applied heat is agreeable. Each inspiration increases the suffering, and so you will notice the BRYONIA patient to have short breaths instead of deep breathing. Gastric, inflammatory affections, disordered stomach and gastric affections in young girls after suppression of menses. BRYONIA is very much indicated in liver troubles. Right lobe of liver is involved. There is soreness, tenderness, stitching pains. Right lobe lies like a load in hypochondrium. And there is nausea, vomiting, pain, soreness associated with liver complaints. All symptoms of disordered stomach. Every motion, deep breathing, coughing aggravates the pain in liver. BRYONIA furnishes many symptoms in connection with stool and rectum. It has constipation and dysentery. No desire, no urging for many days, and after many days, stool black and burnt, and sometimes it is followed by a mucus. In most invertebrate constipation, chronic severe constipation, BRYONIA has diarrhea that drives the patient out of bed in the morning. He feels nausea, distended bowel, and then he has to run to the closet. Or sometimes after rising, when he begins to move, there is distended bowel and suddenly he has to rush to the stool. And after passing stool, he is so much exhausted and covered with sweat on the face that next time it is difficult for him to go to the closet. Purgation is sometimes enormous, copious, gushing, and if he makes a move in the bed, he has to rush to the stool immediately. Bryonia has cured chronic diarrhea when the stool is yellow and cornmeal mushy stools, particularly aggravated in the morning time. It has cured several cases. There are plenty of urinary symptoms in this remedy. There is pain in kidneys with uric acid deposits, burning in urethra when he is not urinating, always feel better after urination. It is a gouty constitution with kidney troubles. After overheating or overexertion, there is pain in back. There are many female symptoms: painful menses, dysmenorrhea, pains across the abdomen, pain in ovaries and in back before and during menstrual period. Bryonia patient is subject to amenorrhea. On slightest provocation, there is suppression of menses. If she becomes overheated from exertion such as ironing or washing few days before menses, it is suppressed, and next time she will have a harder time than ever. Suppression of menses in young plethoric girls. Bryonia must be keep in mind when there are suppression of milk after delivery from overexertion and overheated threatened abortions. There is inflammation of breast with stony hardness, painful sensitiveness is there, and suppression of milk is there after delivery. During confinement, woman become overheated and perspires naturally, and delivery takes place, and if after delivery doctor and nurse do not take care and keep the room warm, suppression of sweat brings out many bryonia symptoms. There is milk fever or other febrile states. In inflammatory conditions of breast, one of the most striking symptom is hardness, stony hardness and heaviness in the breast. Hardness and heaviness prior to menstrual period. Bryonia has dizziness, worse in warm room, too much clothing aggravates, and he wants open air, cool air. Bryonia patient suffers much in opera, in closed places like lycopodium. And young girls that faint every time they go to church or opera are relieved by Ignatia. Another tip which is going to help you very much: when you examine the acute case of appendicitis, you press and there is no pain, and then you realize suddenly that there is pain. And we know that bryonia is aggravation from the movement and amelioration from pressure, because you let it out and it rebounds and it aggravates very much aggravated. That is why bryonia is one of the specific remedy for appendicitis, and it cures 80% of acute cases of appendicitis. To sum up bryonia, we have few symptoms to keep in our mind. All the symptoms are aggravated by movement, slightest motion, amelioration by pressure, dryness of all mucous membranes from mouth to anus, lips, mouth, throat, and all other mucous membranes, and he wants a large quantities of water. Tongue is thickly coated. There are stitching pains in serous membranes and in joints. Chronic constipation, no desire for days, and the stool is hard and burnt. And in diarrhea, there is aggravations in the morning time. Effusions in serous membranes, pleura, peritoneum, and meninges. Rheumatism of joints with pale swelling and slightest motion aggravates. Vicarious menstruation, nosebleed when menses should appear. Bryonia is a remedy, stands very close to nux vomica and pulsatilla. All the three remedies has a stone sensation in the stomach, but bryonia and nux leads, pulse is less. All have bad taste in mouth. BRYONIA and NUX bitter taste and pulse sour. All have nausea and vomiting. BRYONIA aggravation on motion and on rising up. NUX in mornings and pulse in the evening and night. So far as temperament is concerned, BRYONIA and NUX OMICA are easily angered and irritable people, whereas pulse is a mild. Both BRYONIA and NUX are aggravated by emotion. BRYONIA more than NUX, whereas the pulse is a mild personality and is generally ameliorated like rustox by emotion. We know that BRYONIA has stitching pains in inflammatory conditions of chest and pleura. Only one remedy can equal the stitching pains of BRYONIA, that is Kali Kaab. BRYONIA stitching pains are aggravated by slightest motion, while Kali Kaab will occur whether the patient moves or not. BRYONIA patient is ameliorated by pressure, whereas Kali Kaab is not. With this, good day. See you next with another remedy.